Something strange is happening in modern society. More and more young people no longer dream about traditional working life. Not because they are lazy, not because they don't want purpose, but because modern life increasingly feels like an endless cycle of pressure, stress, and survival. But for many younger people today, that path feels far less realistic. In many Norwegian cities, if you buy a small apartment, your mortgage could cost you around $2,000 per month for decades. That changes motivation itself. Because when financial progress feels painfully slow, people begin questioning the system around them. Many younger workers now feel trapped between high living cost, high taxes, student debt, housing pressure, and an increasingly competitive job market. And the competition itself has changed dramatically. Many jobs that once required little or no experience now suddenly demand 5, 7, or even 10 years of experience, even for relatively normal positions. This creates an extremely difficult situation for graduates, because many are forced into low-paid graduate programs or temporary contracts simply to gain enough experience to eventually qualify for stable work. And during those years, life itself gets delayed. Moving out, buying a home, relationships, children, long-term stability. Everything moves later. At the same time, more people than ever before are taking higher education, which sounds positive, but also creates something else. Massive competition. When everyone has degrees themselves become less valuable, and salary growth weakens. So many young people work incredibly hard academically, only to enter a job market that feels overcrowded and financially disappointing. At the same time, another fear is quietly growing. Artificial intelligence. More and more companies are becoming cautious about hiring, not necessarily because business is collapsing, but because nobody fully knows how much AI and automation may replace over the next decade. Large sectors like finance, consulting, banking, and even parts of the oil industry are increasingly discussing efficiency, automation, and AI systems. And younger generations notice this, because it creates uncertainty around the future itself. Why commit your entire life to a career path if technology may radically change the value of that work within a few years? For many young people, the future no longer feels predictable, and that changes motivation itself. Because previous generations often believed hard work would eventually create stability, a home, a family, security, retirement. But many younger workers no longer feel guaranteed any of those things. At the same time, people are expected to work longer than previous generations. Retirement ages are increasing in many countries, partly because people live longer, but also because welfare systems increasingly depend on productive workers remaining in the workforce longer, and many younger people quietly wonder, if life already feels exhausting now, what will it feel like after 40 more years of this? Especially when modern life increasingly feels unstable, economically, professionally, socially, and even psychologically. And when enough uncertainty enters people's lives, long-term motivation slowly begins disappearing. And for many people, modern life increasingly feels repetitive. Wake up, commute, work, come home exhausted, sleep, and repeat. Weeks become months, months become years, and eventually, many people quietly begin wondering, is this really what life is supposed to be? Even people with decent salaries increasingly feel financially stuck, because modern life no longer feels like building wealth. It feels like constantly trying to survive rising costs, and many people feel modern working life leaves very little energy for actual living. Friends become busy, families see each other less. People spend more time alone, and even free time increasingly feels consumed by screens and exhaustion. Many older generations often worked physically harder lives, but many younger people argue modern life feels mentally heavier, because today people rarely feel fully disconnected from stress. Even at home, they feel unable to switch off, and therefore modern life no longer feels calm. There is always something demanding attention. Someone to answer, something to worry about, someone to compare yourself to. And over time, many people begin feeling mentally exhausted. Social media may also be quietly changing how younger generations imagine life itself. For decades, traditional adulthood was considered the default path. Work, marriage, house, and children. But modern digital life constantly exposes people to alternative lifestyles. Travel, freedom, remote work, independence, luxury, and child-free living. And many young people quietly begin questioning whether traditional working life is still worth the sacrifice, especially when the rewards feel smaller than before. This may also explain why burnout has become so common among younger generations, because many people no longer feel they are building towards stability. They feel they are constantly trying to avoid falling behind, financially, socially, professionally, emotionally. And eventually, motivation changes. Not because humans stopped wanting meaning, but because modern systems increasingly feel disconnected from human life itself. This is why shorter workdays and 4-day work weeks are becoming increasingly discussed globally. Some experiments with 6-hour workdays and reduced work weeks actually showed better productivity, lower stress, and happier workers. Because maybe the problem is not that people reject work. Maybe they reject a version of work that consumes too much of life itself. Family time, friendships, health, and sense of purpose. And perhaps this is the real crisis modern societies are facing. Not laziness, not weakness, exhaustion. Because when enough young people stop believing that hard work creates a meaningful future, what are they really working for? And modern economies depend heavily on motivation. They depend on people believing the future is worth building toward. So maybe the real question is not, why are young people less motivated? Maybe the real question is, what kind of society makes motivation disappear? Because maybe people were never meant to live this disconnected from each other, from nature, from purpose, and from time itself. Because right now, across much of the modern world, more and more people quietly seem to be asking, why even try? If you enjoyed this documentary, Please like and subscribe and hit the notification button. And let me know in the comments, do you think modern work itself is the problem? Or has modern life simply become too expensive and exhausting?